You didn't just overpay for your car, you funded a system built to rip you off. Welcome to Connecting the Dots, the channel where we follow the breadcrumbs to predict where disruptions will take us. From secret meetings between rival automakers, to suppliers fixing the price of airbags, to dealerships protected by law from competition. Corruption runs through every layer of the car industry. There's corruption that is so illegal you can't believe they had the guts to do it, and there's corruption that is so legal they have laws protecting them from you. The result is cars that cost much more, break sooner, and evolved slower than they should have. And we've been footing the bill, not just at the dealership, but every time we buy parts, pay for insurance, or step into a service center. But if there really is corruption, why doesn't anybody stop it? And how much would every car cost if it was stopped? Let's connect the dots. If you like my videos, please hit the like button, and now's the time to buckle up. Because this story isn't about one scandal. It's about how the whole game is rigged. Chapter 1. The Circle of Five. Ground truth. Before we dive into this rabbit hole, let's establish the foundation that will accompany us throughout this video. It's all very simple, really. Competition is good, and collusion is bad. When automakers truly compete, they fight for your business by building better cars at lower prices. You get faster acceleration, better fuel economy, more features, superior safety, and longer reliability, all while they cut prices to win your sale. Competition means you drive away with the best possible car for the least amount of money. But when automakers collude, they have little incentive to fight for your business. Instead of investing in breakthrough technologies, everyone agrees to use yesterday's tech. And instead of competing on price, everyone agrees to inflate prices even more. There's always an excuse to raise prices. One year it's COVID, the next it's supply chain, then it's chip shortage, followed by emissions regulations, now it's tariffs. It always sounds justified, but once the reason is gone, the price never goes fully down. True competition gives consumers more for less, while collusion brings less for more. That's why every developed nation has antitrust laws with criminal penalties. The stakes are simple. Without competition, consumers get screwed. So let's start where competition truly improves the breed, Germany. It's a crowded market, where five strong contenders, Mercedes, BMW, Audi, Porsche, and Volkswagen, constantly step on each other's toes. With such fierce rivalry in a crowded market, the companies are locked in an innovation arms race. Unless they constantly develop better, faster, and more luxurious cars, their sales will get gobbled up. At least, that's what I believed. Turns out that with all the car racing glory and all the trash talking, the fiercest automotive rivalry in history is nothing more than the automotive equivalent of professional wrestling. The performance of a lifetime. Picture this. You're shopping for a BMW convertible. The salesperson demonstrates the roof and proudly tells you how it operates smoothly up to 50 kilometers per hour. That's 31 miles per hour. A wonderful feat of engineering. You walk across the street to Mercedes, and it's the same 31 mile per hour limit. Audi, also 31 miles per hour. Porsche, 31 as well. Volkswagen, you guessed it, 31 miles per hour too. There are no regulations limiting roof operation, and they're not using the same mechanisms. So why didn't anyone one-up the competition with a roof operating at faster speeds? It turns out that executives from all companies convened and explicitly decided there will be no arms race when it comes to speed. While stopping at the urban speed limit might seem logical, it's competitors meeting and reaching mutual agreements that isn't. Pulling on that thread unveils a fascinating world of collusion, covering everything regarding German cars from suppliers to technology. When the mask slipped, VW was hit hard for what they did in Dieselgate. But the truth is that BMW and Mercedes did the same. In fact, Dieselgate is just part of a grand collusion story, systematically organized like only German companies can. In 2016, facing possible criminal charges over emissions fraud, Volkswagen did something desperate. Hoping for whistleblower protection, they confessed to something much bigger. The documents they provided to German authorities revealed far more than emissions defeat devices. They showed systematic coordination spanning decades across the entire German automotive industry. The five companies established over 60 working groups, which held well over 1,000 meetings. This shadow organization, internally called the Circle of Five, had Mercedes, BMW, Audi, Porsche, and Volkswagen all operating like divisions of a single megacorporation while pretending to compete. The documents are staggering. These companies coordinated everything, from which suppliers they would all use to which technologies they'd allow each other to develop. They shared internal competitive data, which wasn't provided to non-German rivals. Most damaging of all, they agreed that no manufacturer would introduce any technologies that would make competing vehicles obsolete. If the others couldn't catch up in less than a year, the manufacturer would give them the technology for free. The competitive game of trying to outrun the rest was replaced with a new approach. Let's hold back so we don't outrun anyone. And if groundbreaking engineering doesn't bring any gains, why bother developing it at all? Now, it's perfectly fine when two divisions of the same company, say Chevrolet and Buick, or back in the day Pontiac, agree not to out-innovate each other or use the same suppliers. That's just smart corporate coordination within one business. But when five separate companies pretending to compete secretly coordinate to suppress innovation and control suppliers, that's collusion against both suppliers and consumers. The ads shouted progress through technology, but reality whispered mediocrity through consensus. The emissions trap. Here's where it gets truly infuriating. Remember how in Dieselgate there were defeat devices that cheated emissions tests? That wasn't rogue engineering at one company. It was the inevitable result of coordinated corruption. Diesel emissions can be effectively cleaned using a liquid called AdBlue. This solution works, but the five automakers had jointly agreed to only use tiny AdBlue tanks for diesel emissions cleaning. The reason for tiny tanks is by itself maddening. Adequately sized tanks consume trunk space, and some bozos in marketing wanted that space for premium sound systems they could sell as expensive options. So instead of getting effective emissions control as standard equipment, we received deliberately inferior environmental performance with the option of paying thousands extra for better speakers. And that's not one company or even the Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche group. These were all five German automakers explicitly agreeing to install tanks too small to properly clean emissions, knowing full well the implications. The conspiracy was so deep that they warned against any company breaking ranks and using larger tanks. As one Audi memorandum explains, had one company decided to do so, authorities might get suspicious about why that company needed much more cleaning fluid, and everyone would get exposed. The price we all paid. When authorities finally cracked this, the fines were massive, but only for the emissions piece, which, having gone public in America, wasn't about to go away. But the broader cartel involving every other aspect of vehicle development, this was quietly settled with confidentiality agreements, as was BMW's role in Dieselgate. Mercedes's role was equally large, but they not only avoided headlines but also fines. Aiming for whistleblower protection, VW confessed and gave hundreds of documents to German authorities. However, Mercedes played that game too. Since Mercedes was first, they came out unscathed, with Volkswagen taking all the blame. German automakers colluded, and this affected the entire industry. But how about other manufacturers? For decades, through the 1970s, American automakers openly colluded, coordinating on everything from safety standards to emission controls. By the 1980s, intense antitrust enforcement largely broke up these arrangements. Not wanting to close the party, the automakers got smarter. If GM, Ford, and Stellantis want to coordinate nowadays, they probably do it through industry associations and lobbying groups. Although less direct than the Circle of Five's secret working groups, these mechanisms are technically legal. The difference is transparency. When automakers work through trade associations, there's at least some public oversight. But when they meet in secret conference rooms to divide up suppliers and suppress innovation, that smells like pure cartel behavior. But here's the thing, automakers are just the tip of the collusion iceberg. Even if regulators can keep an eye on the big players, there's an entire ecosystem beneath them that's been operating in the shadows for decades. We started at the top with the automakers themselves, but every car is built from thousands of components made by hundreds of suppliers. Learning that German automakers colluded on everything from horsepower to handbrakes was a sobering experience, but even that didn't prepare me for the coordination in the supplier tiers below. Time to go deeper into this rabbit hole. Let's check what's constantly raising new car prices, one component at a time. Chapter 2. The hidden cost of supplier corruption. The mega cartel. If you thought coordinating 5 automakers was impressive, wait until you see what's been happening in the supplier world. While German automakers were meeting in conference rooms to divide up markets, their suppliers were running an even more sophisticated operation, a web of collusion spanning continents and touching virtually every component in your car. Before going on, I must say that although an entire ecosystem of corruption sounds imaginary, unfortunately, it is real. The last thing I want is to defame someone and get sued, so everything in this video is well documented and, to the best of my research, factually sound. Both American and European authorities have uncovered cartels in automotive suppliers at a scale that makes the German automaker coordination look like amateur hour. For example, the FBI's sticker shock investigation into automotive parts price fixing revealed an ugly picture. As the FBI put it, for more than a decade, Dozens of auto parts companies and executives conspired to rig bids and fix prices on more than $5 billion worth of auto parts sold to U.S. car manufacturers. Think about that number. $5 billion worth of rigged contracts. And that's just what they caught, and in the United States alone. The cases that emerged from these investigations are staggering. In the wire harness conspiracy, multiple Japanese companies coordinated bids for the electrical wiring systems that connect every component in your car. Court documents show they held regular meetings to divide up contracts and ensure each company received predetermined market shares. The airbag cartel was particularly egregious. Companies that were supposed to be competing to build the safest possible airbags were instead coordinating to inflate prices on the very safety equipment designed to save lives in a crash. Multiple executives were sentenced to prison for their roles in fixing prices on these critical safety components. Automotive lighting was another target. Companies coordinated prices on everything from headlights to interior lighting across multiple vehicle manufacturers. These examples are just a fraction of the numerous cases convicted in American courts, and European authorities have been equally busy uncovering systematic collusion across virtually every component category. Wheel and engine bearings? Convicted cartel. Alternators? Cartel. Starters? Cartel. Air conditioning systems? You guessed it, cartel. Safety equipment? Batteries? Cartel and cartel. Door modules, window actuators, spark plugs, braking systems, all had cartels. I could go on, but I don't want to bore you. Instead, let me tie this to an old software engineering joke. A guy visits his friend, now CEO of a small software firm. As they start the office tour, a team of programmers rushes up to the CEO. "Boss," one says, "we've been debugging for hours but can't find the bug." The CEO walks over to their screen and looks hard at the code. Then he scrolls down 2 pages, points at the third line and says, "There's your bug." The programmers check and sure enough, that's a bug. As the team starts fixing, the CEO and his friend resume the tour. Shortly after, another programmer comes up to the boss, trying to find a bug. The CEO heads to the screen again, glances at the code, scrolls 3 pages up and points to a line. The programmer checks, and here too, the CEO was right. By this time, the friend is blown away. "I didn't know you were so brilliant," he says. "How did you spot those bugs?" The CEO shrugs. "I'm not that smart. I just know my team. Their code is so full of bugs that wherever you point your finger, there's bound to be one." That's just a joke about a small firm, but in global auto parts, it's real. Wherever authorities look, there's bound to be a cartel waiting to be found. Car parts could have been much cheaper when fixing your car, but the real shocker is the effect on the price of cars. In the words of FBI Criminal Investigative Director Ronald Hosko, the scheme directly impacted your bank account. These individuals and companies drove up costs for both vehicle makers and buyers, which caused you to spend more. More, but by how much? Consulting firm AlixPartners calculated the impact. Around 25 to 30% of a car's costs for automotive manufacturers are caused by illegal price fixing of the suppliers. In other words, 1/5 to 1/4 of your car's price is pure corruption tax. The average new car costs $48,000 today. 10 to 12,000 of that go to price-fixing cartels. Without corruption, the same car should have only cost $36,000 to $38,000. Want something more relatable? Half of all new cars sell for under $36,000. Without supplier cartels, the same cars would have cost less than $27,000 to $29,000. That's mind-blowing. And I haven't even mentioned how these rigged parts are designed to fail sooner and perform worse. The collusion stories in this video are so brazen they might seem like fiction, but they're real and well documented. To get my facts straight, I triple-checked everything, because nowadays even reputable media mix facts with agenda. That's why I use Ground News, the sponsor of this video. Ground News was founded by a former NASA engineer and provides a data-driven approach to understanding current events. They constantly analyze news from over 50,000 sources and show how stories get covered by different media outlets, including their bias, factuality, and ownership. Take coverage of Volkswagen's recent earnings call. Ground News shows how even seemingly apolitical business news gets twisted to push agendas. The facts are clear. VW was hit hard, but here's where it gets interesting. Each side creates their own villain. Left-leaning sources blame so-called Trump's tariffs as a disruptive force hitting the auto industry, and right-leaning sources blame VW's electric vehicle production as the culprit behind their losses. Same facts, but completely different villains, and Ground News's AI lays it bare. I can instantly see headlines from hundreds of sources, including how far off-center each source leans. Ground News even shows who owns these outlets, because knowing who's behind the news matters. I really love their blind spot feature, which highlights stories that only one side shows. While everyone else argues about headlines, I'm one step ahead, seeing stories the media is trying to bury. This shines light where there's darkness, part of why the Nobel Peace Center called Ground News an excellent way to stay informed, avoid echo chambers, and expand your worldview. To support an independent company fighting media manipulation and take control of how you get your news, head to ground.news/ctdots. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code to get 40% off unlimited access to the Vantage subscription that I use. Go to ground.news/ctdots and you'll see why I'm excited. Tesla's unexpected jackpot. Here's where the story gets an interesting twist. When Tesla entered the automotive market, they faced a peculiar problem. Established suppliers either refused to work with them or quoted impossibly high prices. Some think they didn't want to waste time on a small startup with numerous special demands. Others might say they also didn't want Tesla to succeed, with EVs requiring far fewer parts than gas cars. Regardless of reason, the fact remains that Tesla didn't get the parts it wanted. What seemed like a disadvantage turned into Tesla's secret weapon. Locked out of the cartelized supplier network, Tesla was forced to develop components in-house or find entirely new suppliers outside the traditional automotive ecosystem. While traditional automakers were paying inflated cartel prices for everything from door handles to wiring harnesses and seats, Tesla was building their own components or working with suppliers from completely different industries. The result? Tesla could offer more advanced features at lower production costs. Not because they were more efficient at manufacturing, but because they weren't subject to the supplier corruption tax that everyone else was paying. This partly explains why traditional automakers have struggled so much to match Tesla's margins and pricing. It's not just about manufacturing efficiency, it's about being trapped in a web of cartelized suppliers, while Tesla mostly operates outside that system. The bitter irony? The very supplier cartels designed to extract maximum profit from automakers ended up giving Tesla a massive competitive advantage. When you systematically inflate costs across an entire industry, the company that escapes that system doesn't just save money. They can reinvest those savings into better technology, lower prices, or higher margins. Forced to do many things alone, Tesla learned all aspects of car making, giving them insights into areas traditional car makers just don't have. This also enabled Tesla to have all components communicating with the central computer, while other automakers are bogged down with hundreds of parts from different suppliers, each using a different interface. Making their own wiring and actuators drove further innovation. This paved the way to Tesla's wiring hub patent and the 48-volt architecture, which by Sandy Munro's estimate saves over $100 and several kilograms of weight in every car it is used. And post-COVID, when other manufacturers halted production due to chip shortage, Tesla purchased different chips and programmed the systems to use these instead.
They were confronted with the ECU crisis like every other automaker, and Tesla went through the ECU crisis essentially without a blip. How did they do that? Did they have a better purchasing group, that they somehow had longer contracts with ECUs and chip supply? No. They re-architected the electronic architecture of their vehicle in a matter of months, on the fly, as a running change in the vehicle. That's not possible. You can't do that. Automakers spend years developing the architecture, and then they say hands off for a long time until we develop the next electrical architecture.
Tesla's vertical integration didn't just save them money, but also gave them capabilities that manufacturers more dependent on suppliers just cannot have. The battery cartel. With traditional car companies forced to pay a corruption tax while Tesla avoided it, it might seem as if gas cars were hurt, but EVs got preferential treatment. Not quite. Corruption also prevailed in EV batteries. Batteries are the single most expensive component in any EV, and as such, any price fixing could have a devastating effect on EV prices and profitability. From 2000 to 2011, major battery manufacturers engaged in a sophisticated price-fixing conspiracy that artificially inflated lithium-ion battery costs by 20 to 30%. The cartel included major Japanese and Korean companies like Panasonic, Sanyo, Sony, Samsung, LG Chem, Hitachi, and Toshiba. Representatives from these companies secretly met to set minimum prices, share sensitive production info, allocate markets and rig bids for contracts with large customers such as Dell and HP. The collusion started with batteries for electronic devices such as laptops, but quickly extended to auto supplies. Fixing prices raised battery pack costs for hybrids like the Toyota Prius, and later also EV packs. The cartel avoided competition, keeping prices inflated. Several investigations resulted in massive penalties, proving this wasn't just corporate misbehavior. It was criminal conspiracy. A U.S. DOJ indictment resulted in several guilty pleas, over $200 million in fines, and company executives sentenced up to 18 months in prison. Class action lawsuits added over $100 million in settlements, and a European Commission indictment added over 165 million euros in fines. The cartel added an estimated $2,000 to $5,000 to the cost of early electric and hybrid vehicles through inflated battery pack prices. Beyond the extra cost to consumers, this slowed EV adoption and possibly caused EV startups to fail or decide not to start. But cartel effects aren't just higher prices. By reducing competitive pressure, the conspiracy also reduced incentives for innovation and R&D investment. Economic studies show that price cartels typically reduce firm innovation by around 20% due to reduced competitive pressure. When you don't need to innovate to undercut rivals, why bother investing in better, cheaper technology? This stifled development of more energy-dense, safer, and cheaper batteries that could have accelerated EV adoption throughout the 2010s. After the cartel ended, battery prices finally began falling dramatically. Ironically, this Japanese and Korean cartel created the perfect opening for Chinese battery manufacturers like CATL and BYD, none of whom were part of the conspiracy, to gain massive market share and gain dominance. The inflated prices from cartel members gave Chinese batteries a distinct price advantage, and weak innovation made the moat easier to breach. The cartel also pushed Tesla to take things into their own hands following the Roadster. They built a gigafactory together with Panasonic and later started building their own batteries. The gigafactory wasn't just about scale. It was about breaking free from a cartelized supply chain that constrained the EV revolution. The very companies that could have accelerated the EV transition chose to milk scarcity for profit. But karma does its thing, and cartel coziness contributed to these companies' demise. Chapter 3: When Cost-Cutting Turns Deadly. Sometimes the most chilling stories aren't about greed. They're about the moment when corporate spreadsheets meet human lives and the spreadsheets win. The Takata time bomb. Picture this. You're driving when another car cuts you off. You slam the brakes and hit their side at low speed, the kind of accident where an airbag isn't even needed to save your life, just to prevent bruises. Your airbag deploys to cushion the impact, but instead of protecting you, it kills you. Not from the crash, but from the airbag itself. It explodes like a grenade, sending metal shrapnel into your face and chest. This wasn't a freak accident. This was the inevitable result of a decision made years earlier in a Takata boardroom, where executives chose profits over lives. Takata knew their airbag inflators were defective. Internal documents revealed that as early as 2004, the company was aware that their ammonium nitrate-based propellant could degrade over time, especially in hot, humid climates. When it degraded, the inflators would rupture with uncontrolled explosive force, turning life-saving devices into close-range, deadly weapons. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Takata didn't just hide this from regulators, they actively manipulated test data to cover it up. Engineers were ordered to delete unfavorable test results from databases. When airbags failed during testing, those results simply disappeared from official records. The human cost was staggering. At least 28 people died from Takata airbag explosions, with hundreds more injured. Ashley Parham, an 18-year-old all-state cheerleader from Oklahoma, was picking up her brother from football practice when she got into a minor fender bender in the parking lot. The airbags deployed in her 2001 Honda Accord, but the airbag mechanism shattered, sending shrapnel into the passenger compartment. A piece of metal pierced her carotid artery, and she bled to death just days after her high school graduation. Her injuries were so bad, police initially thought she'd been murdered. In fact, she was the first known American victim of the deadly airbag. Carlos Solis was killed when his Honda Accord's airbag exploded during a parking lot collision at just 12 miles per hour. The metal shrapnel pierced his neck. He was 35 years old, father of 2 young children. As infuriating as it is that Takata knowingly continued making faulty airbags, they're just some distant company nobody outside of auto would have heard of. Distant rogue companies can happen. But here's the part that should make you furious. Major automakers also knew. Honda, Toyota, BMW, Nissan, and Ford. They all received reports of airbag ruptures and deaths, but continued installing Takata airbags for years. Why? Because switching suppliers would have cost money and delayed production. For example, when GM approached its supplier Autoliv with Takata's inflator, which was a few dollars cheaper than Autoliv's unit, Autoliv tested Takata's inflator and decided not to compete. Autoliv scientists warned GM that Takata's inflator was dangerously volatile, yet GM chose to use it anyway. Why? To save a few dollars per car. The final insult? Even after the defects became public, some automakers continued using Takata airbags in new vehicles while the recall was ongoing. They literally sold new cars with the same defective airbags they were supposedly recalling from older vehicles. Dieselgate got people killed from air pollution, but managers could sleep well, with this being a faceless, statistical death. It's hard proving that someone died specifically due to their polluting diesel rather than pollution from other sources. Takata deaths did have faces, but I guess to Takata's managers and those of large auto companies, they too remain statistics, voted on by spreadsheets showing which option enabled higher dividends. GM's deadly math. If the Takata story shocked you, GM's ignition switch scandal will make you lose faith in corporate humanity entirely. The only bright side, maybe, is we get to see Mary Barra portrayed in SNL. Mary Barra, now GM's CEO, sat before Congress in 2014 trying to explain how her company had covered up a defect for over a decade, a defect that could turn off your car's engine while driving, disabling power steering, power brakes, and airbags. The defect was simple: a faulty ignition switch that could slip from run to accessory if jostled by a heavy keychain or rough road. When it slipped, everything shut off. With no power steering, it was hard to control the car. With no power brakes, it was hard to stop it. And with no airbags, you had no protection if you crashed.
Congresswoman Diana DeGette displayed a GM ignition switch and said it would have cost the company 57 cents to fix it.
GM knew about this problem in 2001. They were warned again and again over the next decade, but they did nothing.
GM knew about this defect in 2001. They had internal memos documenting the problem, test results showing the failures, and reports from dealerships about cars mysteriously shutting off while driving. But here's the sickest part. GM's engineers calculated the cost of fixing the problem at about 90 cents per car. 90 cents. The cost of a candy bar could have prevented the deaths that followed. Instead, GM chose to do nothing. Not because the fix was expensive, because acknowledging the defect would have required a recall, and recalls hurt quarterly profits. Actually, they did worse than nothing. In 2006, instead of reporting the problem and initiating a recall, they quietly redesigned the ignition switch to fix the defect. But here's the truly devious part. They gave the new fixed part the exact same part number as the defective one.
Barra was questioned again and again about why the faulty switch was redesigned in 2006 without changing the part number. Mechanics had no way of knowing the new parts from the old defective batch.
It is inconceivable, it is not our process, and it is not acceptable.
This is almost unheard of in manufacturing. When you change a part's design, you change its part number. That's basic engineering protocol. It's how you track which version is which, ensure proper installation, and maintain quality control. By keeping the same part number, GM made it nearly impossible to tell the difference between the deadly switches and the fixed ones. Mechanics couldn't identify which cars had the defective parts. Investigators couldn't trace the scope of the problem. And most importantly, if someone tried to repair their car with what they thought was a new switch, they might unknowingly install another defective one from old inventory. This wasn't incompetence, it was deliberate obfuscation. GM created a paper trail that made their cover-up harder to detect and their liability harder to prove. They weaponized their own parts numbering system to hide evidence of their negligence. The human cost was devastating. At least 124 people died in crashes caused by the faulty ignition switches. Many were young people driving older GM cars, vehicles they could afford precisely because GM had flooded the market with defective cars to maintain sales volumes. Brooke Melton was 29 when her Cobalt's engine shut off on a Georgia highway. Without power steering, she lost control and crashed into oncoming traffic. The airbags never deployed. Her parents spent years fighting GM in court, only to discover that GM had known about the defect all along and had actively covered it up. During congressional hearings, Barra's testimony was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. Here's a snippet of how Saturday Night Live showed it.
And finally, I would just like to apologize to everyone who has been affected by this recall. I can't tell you why it took GM so long to address this safety issue, but I promise we are investigating the matter fully because I represent the new GM. And the new GM is all about honesty and transparency.
Wasn't GM aware of a problem with the Cobalt's ignition switch back in 2006?
We're looking into that.
And what was GM's response when they discovered the problem?
We are looking into that as well.
So you don't know what their response was?
With all due respect, Congressman, that was the old GM. I can only speak to how the new GM would handle it.
Then how would the new GM handle it?
We're looking into that.
Ms. Barra, when did you first find out about the ignition problem?
That's part of our investigation.
This perfectly captures Barra's appearance. When pressed about why GM had taken over a decade to recall the defective cars, her response was always the same. I don't remember, and that was the old GM. The old GM defense was particularly galling. GM argued that because they had gone through bankruptcy, they weren't responsible for the previous company's actions. Legally, they might have been correct. Morally, it was obscene. Moreover, while new GM escaped taking old GM liabilities, old GM was no excuse for GM's current actions. Let's see Barra's reaction to a new law that senators wanted to pass and GM objected to.
Do you support a proposed law that would say recalled cars like yours can no longer be rented or loaned?
I'd like to read the whole bill before I say if I
You'd
support
like to
it or
read
not.
it? Are you aware that recalled cars can be rented or loaned? So you can send your owner of one of these cars to a rental place or get a loaner, and they could get a defective car. Are you aware of that? That there is no law that says?
I know because I've checked for the vehicles here that they are grounded.
I'm asking you, do you support a law that insure others have proposed that say if cars recalled, it cannot be leased or loaned?
My change media is not
Do you support a law that say if cars recalled, it cannot be leased or loaned?
My change media is not
Do you support a law that says yes or no? Essentially, it's not a question. Do you support the bill? Well, you should say.
My change media is not
Do you support a law that says yes or no? Essentially, it's not a question. Do you support the bill? Do you support a law?
Conceptually,
Yes or no?
conceptually, it makes sense. I would like to understand.
Well,
the entire
conceptually is not the question. Do you support the bill?
I haven't read it.
Well, you should, since you were the CEO of GM when we got an email from your organization that you're a part of, the Manufacturers Alliance, opposing the bill. So you already was CEO. This is the new GM.
Senator Boxer summed this up perfectly.
Ms. Barr, I really hate to say this, but if this is the new GM leadership, it's pretty lacking. And I am very disappointed, really, because the culture that you are representing here today is a culture of the status quo.
Chapter 4, The Middlemen Who Control the Market. In one of my previous videos on how GM's Chinese partner SAIC managed to eat GM's global business, I showed how SAIC always played its cards smart to maintain leverage over GM. At one point, GM had to give SAIC 1% of their Shanghai GM joint venture, giving SAIC a controlling 51% stake. That completely flipped the power dynamics. Later, when GM wanted equal footing again, SAIC offered to give that 1% back, but only if GM agreed to distribute all its cars in China through a distribution company SAIC controlled, with GM as a minority partner. GM agreed. After all, factory control seemed more important than distribution. But soon the tables turned. With no way to sell cars except through SAIC's distribution arm, SAIC had a complete monopoly on sales and started setting the terms. They controlled pricing, allocations, and sales volumes. GM's factories were left with razor-thin margins, with most profits flowing to the marketing arm. SAIC even prioritized sales of jointly developed vehicles like Baojun's, while leaving GM-developed models, for which GM earned royalties, sitting unsold. With a complete monopoly on sales, SAIC had GM by the balls, and whenever they wanted something, they squeezed. In my video, I called it a brilliant move by SAIC, but now I realize we've let something worse develop. Not in China, but in the USA. Locked out of your own sales. In most of America, car manufacturers, whether legacy or startup, are legally barred from selling their cars without a dealer, directly to customers. I'm sure you know about this, and if you have your own dealer horror story, please share it below. But things get much worse than they seem. If you're a car manufacturer like Ford, GM, Hyundai, and Toyota, you must go through independent franchise dealers, even if you want to sell online. Even if a buyer is across the street from your factory. Even if they ask to buy direct, you can't. It's a forced distribution model, protected by laws. Just like GM couldn't sell a car in China without making SAIC happy, automakers in America can't sell a single car without keeping a dealer happy. Now, this wouldn't be so bad if dealers competed like normal businesses. Only they don't. Competition prevented by law. Let's say your local coffee shop is overpriced, the staff are rude, and the espresso tastes like burnt radiator fluid. If you're an entrepreneur, that's an opportunity. You open a competing shop across the street, better beans, faster service, fair prices. Do it right, and you'll take most of their business. They either improve or disappear. That's how competition is supposed to work. You win, your customers win, the market works. But if the local car dealership sucks, tough. You can't open a better Ford dealership across the street, and often not even in the same town, because in most states, it's illegal. Franchise laws protect dealers from competition and usually include territory clauses. But you're not one to give up, so you devise a plan. You'll open one where laws allow it, and despite a non-optimal location, if you provide excellent service and lower prices, buyers will come. Your margins will get hit, but if this doubles your sales, that should more than make up for it, right? Not exactly. Vehicle allocations are based on quotas, and if you sell cars too fast, you won't necessarily get more cars, you might just run out. You know how to solve this. You tell the automaker that if they double your allocation, you'll buy the cars from them at a higher price than any other dealer. They'd love to, only they can't. Vehicle allocations are based on rigid formulas tied to past sales and territory, and they too are often protected by laws. In fact, laws often prevent you from raising the invoice price or even lowering the sales price. Dealership protection laws are not only designed to protect dealers against competition from the manufacturer, but also from other dealers. This means there's no price competition, no service competition, and no structural incentive to improve. The dealer across town won't undercut you because they legally can't. And you can't undercut them either, even if you're better, faster, cheaper, or smarter. So why not charge thousands on compulsory dealer packages that add nothing, like this care package offering oil changes and trans flushes on an EV? Innovation, not welcome. And it's not just pricing. As usual with cartels, the system actively resists innovation. Dealers make most of their money after the sale, through service, maintenance, and extended warranties. So when a new vehicle comes along that's more reliable or needs less service, like an EV, they're not eager to sell it. Many dealers dragged their feet on electric vehicles for years. They didn't train staff, didn't order demo units, and discouraged buyers. And when pressed, they told automakers the truth: we'll sell EVs if you raise our cut. And that's not just theory, it's documented fact. Just like SAIC grabbed GM where it hurts, it's the dealers, not the automakers, that decide what cars get sold, how, where, and at what price. The Tesla threat. Tesla's direct sales model terrifies dealers because it exposes how unnecessary they really are nowadays. When customers can configure, order, and take delivery without haggling, hidden fees, or pushy sales tactics, they realize how much dealers have been extracting from every transaction. Tesla's pricing is transparent. No market adjustments, dealer prep fees, or extended warranty upsells. The price on the website is the price you pay. Dealers fought back through their most powerful weapon, state legislatures. They pushed laws specifically targeting Tesla, requiring any company selling cars to also provide dealer franchises. Some states banned direct sales entirely, forcing Tesla to sell cars in neighboring states and deliver them across state lines. Absurdly, it's 2025, and even in its home state of Texas, Tesla is prevented from selling cars. Tesla's hidden jackpot. But where Tesla was allowed to sell, the dealer's rigged system actually helped them. When Tesla started out, it had to compete with gas cars, a mature and efficient industry. And while it had kick-ass products, its competitors enjoyed huge advantages, such as economies of scale. One thing Tesla had, though, was its freedom. Freedom to sell any model it wants, without dealers inflating the price just because they can. But legacy automakers had to sell through a markup machine. So if Ford priced its EV at $45,000 and dealers added $5,000, Tesla didn't have to match the $45K MSRP. They only had to beat $50,000. The dealer markup gave Tesla margin room. They could start less efficiently, still be competitive, and grow. And while legacy EVs were sold by reluctant dealers with no incentive to support them, Tesla controlled its whole experience, from order to delivery to service. And then there's something else. With the dealer cartel, when demand spikes for a new model, the automaker doesn't benefit, and neither does the customer. The dealer tacks on a market adjustment, sometimes $5,000, $10,000, even $30,000, and pockets the difference. The car maker still sells at the same wholesale price, but the buyer pays far above MSRP for no added value. During the pandemic, when car inventories were low, some dealers added $20,000 or more in market adjustments to hot vehicles. A $35,000 Bronco became a $55,000 Bronco overnight, not because Ford raised prices, but because dealers could. But Tesla controls its prices, changing them as needed. When supply was much lower than demand, Tesla raised prices, with all proceeds going to growth. The $26,000 car. We built a legally protected middleman monopoly. It blocks direct sales. It bans competition between dealers. It resists innovation that threatens service revenue, and it takes the profit without making the product. Just like SAIC squeezed GM's factories by controlling distribution, America's dealer network now squeezes the very companies that build the cars. And the cost? We pay it every time we walk into a showroom or even buy a used car. In Chapter 2, we discussed how AlixPartners estimated that 25 to 30% of a car's costs are caused by illegal price fixing of suppliers. Removing that from the car price would have left the average car price at $36,000 to $38,000 versus the current $48,000, but roughly 30 to 50% of the dealer's markup can be attributed to lack of competition. Let's be conservative and assume that's $2,000. Without supplier corruption and dealer legalized corruption, that $48,000 car would have cost $34,000 to $36,000, and a $36,000 RAV4 would have cost around $26,000. The dealer cartel proves that sometimes the most effective corruption isn't hidden in secret meetings. Sometimes it's written right into the law, protecting middlemen who contribute nothing while extracting billions from American car buyers. Chapter 5. The Regulators Who Looked Away. If you're wondering how companies got away with selling deadly cars for years while dealers maintained their legal monopoly, the answer isn't just corporate greed. It's regulatory capture so complete that the very agencies supposed to protect you became accomplices. When watchdogs become lapdogs. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is supposed to be your guardian against automotive dangers. Their mission statement talks about saving lives and preventing injuries. But when it came to the deadliest automotive scandals of the past 2 decades, NHTSA didn't just fail to protect consumers, they actively helped automakers hide the evidence. Take the GM ignition switch scandal. NHTSA received hundreds of complaints about cars mysteriously shutting off while driving. Field reports detailed crashes where airbags failed to deploy. Death certificates piled up showing young drivers killed in accidents that defied explanation. But instead of investigating, NHTSA dismissed these reports as driver error or excessive speeding. When Brooke Melton's parents contacted NHTSA about their daughter's fatal crash, the agency told them it was an isolated incident. This was in 2010, 9 years after GM had known about the defect. Why the willful blindness? Because NHTSA was staffed by former automotive industry executives who maintained cozy relationships with their old employers. The revolving door between NHTSA and Detroit was spinning so fast it could have generated power. The culture was so corrupted that NHTSA investigators were literally afraid to pursue cases against major automakers. Internal emails revealed that agency staff worried about upsetting the industry and facing retaliation from automotive lobbyists who had direct lines to their bosses. The Takata cover-up. The Takata airbag scandal revealed an even more disturbing level of regulatory capture. NHTSA knew about exploding airbags as early as 2009, but took no action for years. Why? Because Takata and the automakers convinced NHTSA that the problem was limited to specific climates and vehicle ages. They provided cherry-picked data that minimized the scope of the defect while suppressing information about the full extent of the danger. NHTSA investigators later admitted they were overwhelmed by the case's complexity and relied heavily on industry experts, the same experts who worked for the companies causing the problem. It was like asking bank robbers to investigate bank security, the dealer protection racket. But NHTSA's failures pale in comparison to the regulatory capture surrounding dealer franchise laws. Here, the corruption isn't hidden. It's institutionalized through campaign contributions and lobbying that would make pharma companies blush. The National Automobile Dealers Association and state dealer associations are among the largest political contributors in America. In the 2020 election cycle alone, auto dealers contributed over $30 million to federal candidates and political action committees. But the real action happens at the state level, where dealer franchise laws are written and enforced. State legislators receive generous campaign contributions from local dealer associations, then vote to protect those same dealers from competition. Take Texas, where the powerful Texas Automobile Dealers Association has spent millions lobbying against Tesla's direct sales model. The association's Political Action Committee has contributed to virtually every member of the Texas legislature. When direct sales bills come up, legislators on the receiving side of dealer money reliably vote to maintain the status quo. Some Texas legislators were blunt. They openly said that local dealerships mattered more than consumer access or competition. One even reportedly advised Elon Musk to sit down with car dealers first before pushing for change. Captured agencies, captured markets. The Federal Trade Commission, supposedly the guardian of free market competition, has been equally compromised on dealer protection. Despite clear evidence that franchise laws restrict competition and inflate prices, the FTC has taken virtually no action. Why? Because dealer associations convinced regulators that monopoly protection serves consumer interests by ensuring local service and accountability. It's a masterpiece of regulatory capture, convincing antitrust enforcers that monopolies are good for competition. The absurdity peaked when the FTC backed dealer positions in Tesla's legal battles, arguing that direct sales might confuse consumers who are supposedly too stupid to understand buying a car from its manufacturer. Europe is no better. Some say Europe is tougher on automakers. The European Commission holds trials and imposes fines. That must mean they're doing their job, right? Not really. For years, European regulators ignored clear evidence of cheating. Internal documents show German authorities had early warnings about diesel fraud from environmental groups and their own technical agencies. According to Der Spiegel, Germany's Vehicle Safety Authority knew as early as 2007 that some diesel cars emitted far more NOx in real driving than in lab tests. Nothing was done. In 2012, a European Commission research project also flagged discrepancies. Still no action. It wasn't until U.S. authorities forced Volkswagen to confess that European regulators finally acted. Even then, Germany tried to delay or weaken enforcement, lobbying against stricter EU testing rules and downplaying Mercedes and BMW's roles in Dieselgate. And what about cartel behavior? When the Circle of Five, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Porsche was exposed, the Commission eventually fined them, but only for colluding on emissions tech, not for price fixing, market division, or shared components. Not a single executive was prosecuted. The only area where Europe is clearly better is in allowing more competition, with far fewer dealer protection laws. But when it comes to prosecuting automakers, Europe may be even more lenient than the US. Bottom line, regulatory capture isn't just American. In Europe, it's just better dressed. The revolving door. The personnel flows between industry and regulators tell the whole story. Former NHTSA heads get consulting gigs with automakers. Dealer lobbyists become state transportation officials. Auto executives are appointed to oversee the agencies meant to regulate them. This isn't corruption in the traditional sense. There are no envelopes of cash or secret accounts. It's more insidious, a system where regulators know leniency today means a dream job tomorrow. And for politicians, there's always the next campaign. Automakers, suppliers, and dealers all make legal but massive contributions, gaining quiet influence over legislation and enforcement. If you raise competition on their sales, they'll raise competition on your seat once it's time for re-election. But the revolving door and donations are just part of the story. A deeper reason is the national champion mindset. The belief that protecting the auto industry means protecting jobs, exports, and the economy. So enforcement stays soft. From the US to Germany, Japan to Korea, regulators often treat automakers not as entities to supervise, but as institutions to shield. The result is a system that talks tough about safety and competition while shielding the very companies harming consumers. They hold hearings, issue reports, give speeches, and slap wrists, just enough to prove they're doing something. But when it comes to real enforcement, they look the other way. Until that changes, until regulators serve consumers, not industries, the collusion, the deadly defects, and the inflated prices will continue. Because the foxes aren't just guarding the henhouse, they're living in it. Chapter 6. The bill keeps coming. I've shown how corruption raised the average car price from around $34,000 to today's $48,000, and the price of a compact utility vehicle like the RAV4 from $26,000 to $36,000. But here's what should terrify you. If every case I've discussed was eventually caught and often prosecuted, why am I not talking in past tense? Why do I believe this corruption still persists? There are several reasons, and the first is that crime still pays. Let's look at those battery cartel prosecutions. The US DOJ hit Panasonic and Sanyo with a $56.6 million fine and LG Chem with $58.3 million. Sounds serious, right? Until you realize LG Chem's revenue that year alone was $21 billion, and Panasonic's nearly 4 times that. That $58 million fine, it's 0.25% of that year's revenue for a conspiracy that ran over a decade. It's not a penalty, it's a cost of doing business. It's a rounding error. The message to every supplier is clear. You probably won't get caught, and if you do, you'll pay far less than you made. And as for the German automakers, despite irrefutable evidence and confessions about the cartel, they didn't even get slapped on the wrist. Nobody was punished at all. This isn't justice. It's a license for theft. The prices that never fell. But here's a test that shows corruption probably didn't end. If supplier collusion added 25 to 30% to costs, why didn't prices fall after the cartels were busted? When the wire harness cartel was caught, did cars get cheaper? Not really. When the airbag cartel exploded, did safety equipment prices fall? Think again. When the bearing cartel was fined, did maintenance costs drop? Yeah, right. And when the German automaker cartel got busted, did they start fiercely competing on price, features, or technology? Who am I kidding? Suppliers paid fines, issued press releases, and probably kept right on charging inflated margins. Because why wouldn't they? At worst, another slap on the wrist. Besides, executive compensation is tied to profit and stock price, and corruption is great for both. New tricks, same theft. The dealer monopoly, still untouched. Tesla still can't sell in multiple states. Rivian still fights state by state. VW still can't directly sell its upcoming Scout models. The markup machine churns on. As for supplier collusion, yes, a few people went to jail, but most companies just got smarter. Instead of recorded meetings, they coordinate via industry associations and trade groups. Instead of fixing prices outright, they align on best practices and industry standards, with the same result. The German Circle of Five got caught because they were arrogant enough to keep detailed records explicitly labeled secret meeting. As absurd as it sounds, I swear. Today's cartels learned they're more careful, more sophisticated, but just as damaging to your wallet. Your dreams priced out of reach. Car prices are spiraling. Fewer people can afford new cars. Even used cars now cost a fortune. It shouldn't be this way. Want a BMW 3 Series? Over $47,000. Without corruption, it should be around $14,000 less. Prefer a Toyota Camry? It starts at $27,500, but should be priced something like $20,000. If you can't afford either, the cheapest new car in America is the Nissan Versa at $18,330. What if it only costs $13,000? And at the other edge of the pool, the real price of a $100,000 Escalade or Lexus LX should only be $75,000. But you'll have to decide where to put that leftover change. What would that mean for your life? How many young people drive beaters because they can't afford the corruption tax on a safe, reliable car? How many families drown in debt, paying inflated prices for a basic necessity? And it gets even worse because higher car prices also mean higher insurance. And higher parts prices mean higher repair bills, where every repair could be a financial gut punch. This isn't inflation. Prices have outpaced it dramatically. This isn't about safety tech. Most systems are standardized and should be cheaper than ABS and airbags cost 30 years ago. And this isn't better materials. Many modern cars are less durable and more failure-prone than old ones. It's the price of corruption, pure and simple. Every time you walk into a dealership, you're paying a corruption tax to middlemen who add little value. Every time you buy replacement parts, you're paying inflated prices set by supplier cartels. Every time you finance a car, you're borrowing money to pay for a product whose price has been artificially inflated by systematic collusion. The automotive industry has turned corruption into a science, and we're all paying the bill. The question isn't whether this continues, it's whether we'll keep accepting it. And what will it take to stop? Now let me know in the comments. Do you agree with me or did I get something wrong? What would competitive car pricing mean for you? How can we change this? And don't forget to share your worst or even best dealer experience. Let me know below. I read almost all the comments. If this video opened your eyes to how badly we're all getting ripped off, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. But here's something that would help even more. Share this video. I really appreciate Patreon support and subscriptions. They're what keeps this channel going. But with this topic, the best way to help is spreading the word. Share it on social media, post it in car forums, send it to friends who complain about car prices. The more people understand how they're being ripped off, the harder it is for corruption to continue, and the higher the chance we get things to change. A huge thank you to my latest patrons, James P., Crunch DGH, Edward B., and JT. Without patrons, this channel wouldn't be possible, so thanks guys. And to all my patrons, you guys rock. To help keep this content going, consider joining me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Don't forget to visit ground.news/ctdots to stay informed and avoid misleading narratives. You'll get 40% off the Vantage plan, which I use, and it takes one visit to see why I'm excited. For daily insights, follow me on X at ConnectingODots. Until next time, even if the car industry thinks we are suckers, I am connecting the dots and you are amazing.
When you're up against the wall and you cannot fall, so go off, go off.